Hey guys, how's it going? Coming back again to talk about another one of the old school tanks in World of Tanks. This time looking at the German Tier 10 medium, the E50M. Talked about the T62A yesterday, so this is one of the machines that was in the game at launch. One of the oldest tanks in the game, and just like all the other tanks we kind of talked about already, changed some ways since it's been introduced. And um, it's really cool to kind of play this tank. Um, I will say off the bat, I don't think it's one of the better mediums, unfortunately, and we'll kind of get into the reasons why. But I really do have a soft spot in my heart for this tank because it is, it's old. It looks great. It's a great looking tank. It is pretty fun to play as well, and we all know E50Ms more than anything notorious for ramming, right? So we'll kind of get into it here. So, this tank, we're talking about this video out there since the beginning, and its whole identity has always been centered around really two things. And those two things are its armor and its ridiculously accurate gun. That's kind of the whole strength of this tank. So, and you'll see in some of these replays here, even in this one, this VZ55 I'm fighting. There you go. Get a nice bounce right there, even though I'm not hold down or side scraping or anything. So the armor, it's kind of like a cross between, a Tiger 2 if you decided to make a Tiger 2 a medium tank and make it go really, really fast. It's got a really strong upper plate. It's 150 millimeters thick and it's sloped back pretty close to about 60 degrees, I want to say. It's really good effective armor on the flat, if people aren't shooting down on it, and you can bounce pretty much. You're not really scared of standard rounds, let's say, in this game. Some really high pen tanks can pen your upper plate, but if you angle the tank, it's a no-go zone. It's kind of feels like an E75 a lot of the time, as long as folks aren't spamming like a Jagdpanzer and 100 firing heat. I wouldn't present any tank in the game in front of that thing. Um, so you have that fertile plate in a medium package, which is kind of what this tank's supposed to be strong with, right? You can kind of brawl with it. You can kind of play up front with heavies and use your armor and use your decent hit point pool. You got 2,100 health these days. I think it used to be 2,000 or maybe 1950. I think it did get buffed once or twice, which it's a good chunk of health for a tier 10 medium tank. It's on the upper end for sure. I can't really think of any mediums that have more health. Maybe there's one or two that have like 2,150, but this is a healthy tank. And the other part that kind of made this tank have its identity is this gun. You can see I'm taking some pretty long range shots and just kind of shooting tanks at my leisure and sniping, which is a fun package. You have armor, you have accuracy, and surprisingly, you also have really good mobility in the E50M. It actually has a really good top speed. I think it's 60 kilometers an hour, pretty as close as you can get, really. Um, and it has a good horsepower to weight ratio, which means you are able to get around the battlefield pretty quick. You saw at the beginning of this match, I just went ahead and rushed right up into the middle. A spoiler alert, we don't win this game. In case it wasn't incredibly obvious already, this team wasn't very good, unfortunately. But kind of wanted to show it because it shows you can do well in this tank, even if your team isn't doing particularly great. There's a platoon in here that we will see again in the next replay because it was the very next match where I kind of got my revenge on them, which felt kind of sweet. So, um, yeah, this gun's really accurate. It always has been. Has a really nice aim time. It's pretty accurate on the move. Not to the level of a T62A or an M48 Patton, for instance, but not bad. You could reliably hit tanks. You're not really gonna aim for weak spots on the move with it, but it's really nice. Pretty nice bouncer from T124. I know he's upset with that. I would be. So those are the strengths of it. What have always been kind of the downsides? Well, the truth is that even though you have a great upper front plate, every other piece of armor on this tank, unfortunately, is not very good and has not been very good. Um, obviously, you spot the lower plate. Okay, you gotta be able to hide that if you're playing with this tank. And we'll talk about some of the buffs recently, but just going back to when the game was first introduced, its turret was just like the Tiger II at tier 8, but at tier 10, 185 millimeters thick. And there's that Conqueror that gets me. Don't worry, he gets his next match. 185 millimeters thick, and you're at tier 10, and it wasn't very good on a tier 8 machine. At tier 10 in a supposedly heavily armored medium, it just is not going to cut it. And you know what it means when you have a weak turret is if you can shoot the enemy, they can pen you. There's no way to get around that. If you're side scraping, if you're playing hold down using gun depression, they're going to be able to pen you. And pretty much every tank you meet could do it with standard rounds. So you had to really keep moving and stay mobile. You can't sit still. You have to rock forwards and backwards and try to, you know, encourage them to bounce on your well-angled turret cheeks, or maybe hit your gun mantlet. And then you had that as a deficiency. The other kind of big problem with this tank, and it's still a problem to this day, since you are kind of big and heavily armored, you don't have good camo. And ironically, in this game, it kind of feels like camouflage more than armor actually lets you play aggressive because it determines what positions you can make it to without being detected to actually try and influence the battle here. So, for instance, on Westfield, you can see I'm making good speed. I got up here pretty quick. Still kind of going uphill, but we're going to start getting into the 50 kilometers an hour range here. But if someone else was making this cross, they would spot me before I spotted them because I don't have good camo on this machine. No matter how you build it, it's just not going to be very good. And I'd get spotted and probably killed before I get here. So my armor would not save me there. The thing that would save me is the camo, and that's what would let me play a lot more aggressive. So um, and it's not crippling. You can have okay camo if you run the camouflage equipment and skill, which I do. But you're really investing into something that's not going to pay dividends. And there's the exact same Super Conqueror from last game still here with his platoon mates, and I think it was a T62A and a T124. So he's already not having a great time, and I certainly am. I remembered him, and well, so you win some, you lose some in this game. Um, so the E50M, the other, I guess, the last kind of weakness it had to give up for great upper front plate, good mobility, and a pretty good gun, also has to do with the gun, unfortunately. And this thing has always been the redheaded stepchild, and I don't know why, because the machine itself isn't anywhere near overpowered or even, I would say, great. I just think it's good. It's always had horrific DPM. Back when it was introduced, the Patton had a faster rate of fire. The FE4202 had a better rate of fire. The Leopard had a better rate of fire. The STV1 had a better rate. And anything with a 105 mil gun had a better rate of fire in DPM. And just, for reference, this is back when all the 105s had 390 alpha. They eventually introduced the Chinese medium at the same tier with 440 alpha. And for a long time, this thing and that tank both had the same rate of fire, but that tank got 440 alpha. So even the thing with the derpy gun, that was all about alpha, had more DPM than you. Um, so that's kind of the way they wanted to balance this. It's more about making good shots, good quality shots, not pumping out a whole lot of damage. And it's good on paper. The concept of this tank is good on paper, but in practice, as we all know in World of Tanks, armor only counts for so much. And the second that people go ahead and load premium, your strength is gone. That T62A, poor guy. Those things been lighting a lot on fire recently. I had another one in my last video uploaded to light on fire. Um, so that was this tank from the get go. It wasn't the best tier 10 medium. It never was, and it really honestly never will be. This archetype of vehicle just can't do it. That doesn't mean that it's not good. It's still a strong tank. It's still fun to play. And at the end of the day, you are a tier 10 medium. You do have pretty good DPM, and you do have a really good gun, and you have mobility. So you could certainly make it work. And you could, and I think maybe better than most tier 10 vehicles, this thing is really good at bullying low tiers. I think the next match, the last one, there's some tier 8s that you kind of got to feel bad for. So um, that was this tank's kind of profile and introduction for most of its life. And then it went through, I think, two significant um, changes. I think the first one they did the take line reforge is what they were calling it at the time. Um, and they really missed the mark on this thing. What they were gonna try to do is, look at older tanks with these reforges. They've done it for the T125, the Pattons, the E50M. The Leopard had one too, where they go back and kind of buff some older tanks, and they missed so hard on this whole line, honestly. What they did for the top tier and the E50M was they gave it. Sorry for there's also like sorry real quick. There's gonna be a cut here. After I get spotted here in a second, I saw this 30B or 30 prototype, whatever he was running. I knew I was about to get spotted, so I knew I was gonna have to shoot him and then kind of pray. And it hurt pretty bad what's about to happen to me, but I did survive and then just went ahead and moved my way to another flank because this position was longer, and wasn't tenable any longer. E4 is down there, and they got a bunch of guys on that ridge across from me, so I just went ahead and moved over. Um, but back to that reforge, the most significant thing they did with some smaller changes is they said we're gonna go ahead and fix that turret um, weakness just like we fixed the Tiger 2 at tier 8. The problem is they put a band-aid on a broken bone because they took just a massive half measure with that reforge and they made this thing's turret instead of 185 230. Um is it better? I mean, factually and objectively, yes. There's no real other way to put it. But is it anywhere near good enough or change the fact that your turret is cheese for most of the tanks you're going to fight? No, absolutely not. 230 is not good enough. It's not thick enough. Standard rounds of this tier are 250 and up. And again, it's nice and flat with minimal sloping. So, I mean, what are what are we really doing here? I don't know who thought that was an effective change. It changed almost nothing in terms of how this tank plays and your weaknesses. It was just really ineffective. So after that round of changes, um, eventually they did come out with another buff to the tank. I think it was right before we went to the universal like 105 does 420 alpha because I remember being excited because one of the changes was they actually made the turret armor somewhat usable now. Oh, that was a horrible shot. The physics in this game are so weird sometimes. Um, but the 105, I'm sorry, the turret armor is now 250 millimeters thick. Which this actually does give you some resistance to standard ammunition at this tier that 230 just doesn't. So I mean that's good. It's where I really would have put it, somewhere between 250 maybe up to like 254 like an E75 turret. You're still going to get pen in the face from high tier tank destroyers and premium rounds, and even sometimes from standard rounds if they get a good penetration roll, but it's a lot less consistent, which means people are going to be less inclined to shoot at that turret, right? And then the other thing they buffed, thankfully, was the rate of fire on the 105. Thankfully, now it wasn't a huge amount of DPM increase. I think it was like maybe like a 5% or something like that, but definitely welcome. The tank, it did have some problems pumping out damage when it needed to in comparison to the other tier 10s. And that's really kind of tier 10 mediums MOs is they have good DPM and gun handling. And if you take one of those things away, it's kind of hard to play the tank. So right afterwards, they then proceeded to buff all the 105s to 420 alpha damage. All the 105s, that is, except for the Pori 50M. It is one of the few tier 10 mediums with a 105 mil gun that is still sitting at 390 alpha, and that's where it sits today. So it has better armor, some more health, and a bit more DPM than when it first did. But that's to say that this tank is not meta. It'll never be meta. It doesn't have stealth, and it doesn't have a crazy gun. I mean, the gun's good. It's accurate, and one of the reasons for some reason, they thought they could get away with, I guess, having it a bit weaker of a tier 10 gun is that it has more penetration than the other guns, right? Yeah, it's got 270 standard pen, which I understand the second number in that figure being a 7 instead of like a 6, like the 268 on the patent or the 264 on a T62 sounds like, oh, it's a penetration advantage. There's nothing really in the game you're penning with 270 that you're not penning with 268 or 264, okay? It pretty much has identical pen to the other ones. It looks cool on paper. Um, but it does have great shell velocity, like I said, great accuracy. Back when before they nerfed accuracy and fire rate globally, I mean this thing when you ran steady aim for that accuracy increase. Oh my god, the shots that I could pull off in this vehicle. I mean, I was hitting cupolas on like Object 277s at 500 meters, and I was as long as my reticle was dead set on it, I had all the confidence in the world that I was going to hit and penetrate that tank. And you know, those some of that accuracy has been undone, but even now it's a phenomenal gun. It's more accurate than like a Patton, something like that, and it's pretty much right next to the Leopard in terms of just laser like accuracy. Not the biggest strength in the game because most tanks are pretty accurate. There's not a lot of times you need to snipe weak spots at extreme range. You know, when you're shooting at long range, really what you're trying to do is just hit the damn thing. And you know, most tanks can do that. So accuracy isn't the biggest strength to really rely on, but you know, it's there. It's nice, and you'll see in this game here. You know, this T95E6, that position, I still have no clue how people get up there, but it is a pain because this is kind of the power position from the western spawn. I think this is the better, you know, spawn overall on this map. But that's a pretty good counter to it. Unfortunately, his whole team kind of died and left him out here high and dry. And he decides, let me ram an E50. How'd that go for you? I think I lost like 20 health, and he lost almost 200. And now he's a one shot for everyone else that can hit him. And yeah, that didn't I didn't do too much for him, but hey, um, you know, A for effort for him. His team kind of let him down there. And I've already blocked some damage, more than it's actually listed. It says I've only blocked 440, but I've been shot like 3 times. And I'm gonna get shot quite a bit more this game. It doesn't really actually record every bounce, so really know what's going on with that. But you're gonna see the armor hold up pretty well here when I go to fight these heavies on the flank. Trying to desperately here this big fat tiger that died in the way, but I'm not gonna get up here and um, yeah, it's two object 277s, and they like to fire heat. As you can see there, a heat shell just whizzed by, aimed at the Jagdpanzer. So I knew here I was going to have to try and bait some shots. If I could face them and shoot them, they're going to be able to pen me regardless of how I'm angled. So that's kind of what I do here. I come up here. He's not paying attention, so kind of snap a shot into his lower plate. And then his buddy here, I'm go ahead and just kind of coax him with this upper plate, and there you go. I mean that's why you play an E50M right there, to just bully people. And you know, when the armor works, it's really satisfying. You know, if I was in like a T62A, even at that angle with that amount of heat pen he's got, it probably would have went through because you know heat almost always rolls for penetration. And here I'm kind of side scraping, angling my turret and trying to bait him into shooting with his heat round. And he's not doing it. You know, I have some allies coming up behind me. He decides to shoot them instead. But you know, this has usable armor. If you use it smartly, it is definitely a strength. And then we just kind of do the medium tank thing here, track him, go around, and Conquer pops his top after our damages ammo rack. Would have loved for me to do it, but hey, it's always fun to see, and that's some good teamwork right there. And you know, this was a pretty good team I got to play on. So, um, yeah, in 2026, you know, the E50M, it's a good tank. I think you know a lot of people won't necessarily want this tank for two reasons. A lot of the shortcomings we listed between camo, the armor not being really dependable against players who know what they're doing, or opt to load, you know, heat rounds, but also because the line's not, it's not great. The tier 6 these days is awesome. It's basically a Panther at tier 6. They buffed that thing to have a strong upper front plate just like the Panther has, and good DPM, but then the Panther's not, it's not great. It's fat with ineffective armor and no camo and a weedy gun. The Panther 2 as well. It's a tier 8 medium. None of them are really all that great just because they have to fight tier 10s. The E50 at tier 9 is good. It suffers from mediocre pen, so you have to spam a lot of APCR for the games it gets into, but the E50, the E50M are kind of the same. Both really good tanks. They've been brought into more the original vision of what they were going to be since the beginning, so glad Wargaming did change them. And overall, it's fun to play, it's fun to ram, it's fun to snipe, it's fun to get around, and it's fun to bounce shots and bully tanks. So these are just some games I had in the session. They went pretty well, nothing crazy or anything like that. So leave your thoughts on the E50M, and I'll keep the videos coming. So hope you guys take care, and we'll talk soon.